5 horror films made between 1922 and 1968. Every audience that watched them on release is mostly dead now, and every single one of them accidentally predicted exactly what's happening to us right now in 2026. There's this assumption we carry around that old horror is quaint, that black and white monsters and rubber bats and organ music belong to a simpler time, a time that couldn't possibly understand what we're living through. But here's the thing about horror, real horror, the kind that survives 100 years in the public domain where anyone can watch it for free. It doesn't age out, it ferments. These 5 films weren't trying to be prophetic. Their directors weren't futurists. They were just scared. Scared of the same things we're scared of now. Only they didn't have the language for it yet. So they dressed it up in monsters and fog machines and castles. And when you strip all that away, what's left underneath is a blueprint, a warning, one that nobody was supposed to take literally. What I want to do now is walk through 5 public domain horror films released between 1922 and 1968 and show you how each one eerily mirrors something specific about life in 2026, not a vague thematic overlap, specific uncomfortable parallels. And the last one, the oldest one on the list, is the one that unsettles me the most. Let's start with the one most people know, Night of the Living Dead. 1968, George Romero's debut. A group of strangers barricade themselves inside a Pennsylvania farmhouse, while reanimated corpses shuffle across the countryside. The dead aren't fast. They aren't clever, they're just relentless, and they're everywhere. But here's the thing Romero understood that most people miss on first viewing. The zombies aren't the real threat. The people inside the house are. Ben and Harry Cooper spend more time fighting each other over who controls the basement than they do fighting the dead. They have the same goal, survival. And they still can't cooperate. Resources exist, a plan exists, but ego and distrust tear them apart faster than any ghoul could. That feels uncomfortably close to 2026, where we're surrounded by solvable problems and paralyzed by the inability to agree on who gets to solve them. Climate policy, pandemic preparedness infrastructure still unfinished, AI governance. The threat is outside the house, slow moving, almost stupid in its simplicity. And we're in here arguing about the basement door. Romero shot the whole thing for $114,000 on leftover 35mm stock. He wasn't trying to predict the future, he was just watching the present. But here's what makes the next one even darker. Because at least in Romero's film, the characters knew they were trapped. Carnival of Souls came out in 1962, directed by Harvey, an industrial filmmaker from Kansas who had never made a feature and never would again. Mary Henry survives a car crash off a bridge. She drives to Utah to start a new life as a church organist, but something follows her, a ghoulish pale figure who appears in windows, in mirrors on the horizon, and slowly the people around her stop seeing her. She speaks and no one responds. She reaches out and no one reacts. She becomes invisible in a crowd. 83 minutes of a woman dissolving out of her own existence. In 2026, we have a word for this. Several, actually. Social isolation, disconnection, the epidemic of invisibility that mental health researchers keep publishing papers about and no one seems to read. Mary Henry is surrounded by people at her church, at her boarding house, at a pavilion by the Great Salt Lake, and not one of them truly registers her presence. She could be read as the first cinematic depiction of what it feels like to exist in a world that's optimized for engagement but starved for actual contact. Harvey made this film for $33,000 with a crew of mostly University of Kansas students. He saw something in 1962 that we're only now building vocabulary around, and the next prediction takes that loneliness and weaponizes it. House on Haunted Hill, 1959. William Castle directing, Vincent Price starring as Frederick Loren, an eccentric millionaire who invites 5 strangers to spend the night in a supposedly haunted house, survive until morning, and each guest receives $10,000. The setup sounds like a game show, and that's exactly the point, because nothing in that house is what it appears to be. The ghosts are mechanical, the scares are staged. Loren and his wife are manipulating every person in the building as part of an elaborate scheme against each other. The guests aren't participants, they're instruments, and they don't figure it out until someone is already dead. In 2026, we live inside versions of this house every single day. Algorithmic feeds that feel like discovery but are architected experiences. Engagement systems designed to provoke specific emotional responses: rage, fear, moral superiority. We think we're guests making choices, but the architecture of the room has already decided what we'll do. Frederick Loren didn't need supernatural power. He just needed to control the environment and let human psychology do the rest. Castle understood that the scariest thing isn't a ghost, it's a system that knows you better than you know yourself. 74 minutes long, shot on a budget that wouldn't cover catering on a modern set. But the next film goes even further back and gets even closer to where we are now. White Zombie, 1932. Often cited as the first feature-length zombie film ever made. Bela Lugosi plays Murder Legenda, and yes, that's actually the character's name. A Haitian mill owner who uses voodoo to turn living people into mindless laborers. Not undead, not resurrected, living human beings, stripped of will, working his sugar mill in silence day and night, with empty eyes and mechanical repetition. They don't groan, they don't lunge, they just work. There's a scene early in the film where the camera pans across a line of zombified workers operating the mill's grinding mechanism. One of them falls into the machinery, the others don't stop, they don't look. Production continues uninterrupted. In 2026, the gig economy runs on something that could be read as eerily similar logic. Not voodoo, obviously, but systems designed to extract maximum labor while minimizing the worker's sense of individual agency, algorithmic management, performance metrics that punish hesitation, platforms where the human being is functionally interchangeable with the next one in the queue. Legender's mill didn't need change, it needed compliance, and compliance is cheapest when people stop recognizing themselves as people. 306,000 people have downloaded this film from the public domain. Most of them probably watched it for Lugosi, but the sugar mill scene is the one that stays with you. And the final prediction, the oldest film on this list, is the one I genuinely cannot stop thinking about. Nosferatu, 1922. F.W. Murnau's unauthorized adaptation of Dracula, so close to Stoker's novel that his estate sued and a court ordered every print destroyed. They failed, obviously. The film survived, like its monster. Count Orlok doesn't charm his victims, he isn't seductive. He is repulsive. Long fingers, red teeth, hollow eyes. He arrives in the German town of Wisborg, hiding in cargo crates filled with dirt and plague rats. The town doesn't know what's coming, and when people start dying, they don't blame Orlok. They blame disease, they call it pestilence. They quarantine the streets, nail boards over doors, and publish official notices blaming the deaths on an epidemic. The monster is right there, feeding every night, and the institutional response is to treat it as a public health crisis because that framework is more comfortable than admitting something predatory has moved into the infrastructure. In 2026, this pattern feels almost mundane. Systems that extract, that drain, that hollow out communities. And the official response is always framed in language that avoids naming the actual mechanism. Orlok didn't need to hide. The bureaucracy hit him. Murnau shot this film over 100 years ago in actual European locations. Wisborg was really Wismar, Germany. The shadow of Orlok climbing the staircase is one of the most replicated images in cinema history. But the real horror isn't the shadow. It's that the town had every piece of information it needed and still chose the comfortable explanation every time. The next one we pull out of the dark is a horror film almost nobody talks about anymore. But the moment you see it, you'll understand why it shaped everything that came after. See you in the next one.